So, ACC finally dropped undoubtedly the most highly anticipated DLC in the game's history. With it, we get the almighty Nürburgring Nordschleife. But with the price tag of $13 US, 30% of the game's base value, is it really worth it? Let's take a quick deep dive into this DLC to find out if it is truly worth your hard-earned 13 bucks. So why don't we start with something that isn't new? That is, the Grand Prix layout of this circuit, which, for the most part, is the same as the Nürburgring layout we have had since the game's launch. Or is it? See, the first thing I noticed when I got on track was just how much darker the tarmac was. And when I went back and checked the other version that we have in this game, it was indeed a little bit darker. A little bit of research also shows that this was, in fact, intentional. See, the Nürburgring, both the Nordschleife and the GP track, were resurfaced in real life in 2022, lending to that darker finish that we notice on the newer track. I personally think this is some pretty crazy attention to detail on Kunos' side, and it is reassurance that we do, in fact, have an up-to-date version of this track. Other than that, the GP circuit is mostly exactly the same, except for the slight change in layout that is used in the endurance track. We could see the slight change in turn 1, and we see that the stadium section is now indeed filled with camper vans. There is also some changing in curbing at the last chicane of the GP circuit here, where instead of having a sausage curb on the inside of the turn, we now have a huge piece of raised curb that is definitely set to send someone flying into the Shadow Realm during a race. But that boring stuff out of the way, let's talk about the star of the show, which is the Nordschleife. And what can I say? It's called the Green Hell for a reason. ACC does a pretty damn good job at capturing the thick forestry surrounding the track, and it looks surprisingly good from above track level as well. All the details on track seem to be faithfully recreated, from the graffiti and writing all the way to the curbing around the track. It really is a work of art. If you do happen to get this track or already have it, I highly recommend you to just take some time to appreciate some of those details, the grass, the trees, everything around it as well. But those details aside, the game's visuals, the sun, the lighting, definitely enhances the experience, as the sun often peeks through the thick forest and forestry at times, causing some pretty cool visual effects. There's also just something special about flying down Flansgarten while being absolutely blinded by the setting sun. And when the sun does fully set, it's a completely different beast. The colored lighting going into Hatzenbach and different parts of the track adds to the immersion of driving here through the night. I think it's awesome to see Kunos recreate the atmosphere of the 24 hours of Nürburgring, as spectators and campers line the whole track with their campfires and lighting. Overall, I would say that coupled with the already visually strong game engine, it is really hard to beat ACC's visual representation of this beast of a track. So I've talked about how it looks, but how is it to drive on? Well, if you have been watching other videos on YouTube, then I'm sure you've heard different people say different things about the Nordschleife. And a lot of what most people have to say is that it is the most accurate version of the Nordschleife available online. And I do believe that to hold true in this case. However, if the one-to-one accuracy of the track to the real-life version, its real-life counterpart, is the most important aspect to you, then I personally do not believe I am the right person to judge that, as I've personally never been to or driven around the ring in person. What I can say though is that it is a challenging track to learn and drive on. Having driven the ring in a few other sims, ACC is one of the more bumpy versions of the track. With certain cars like the Porsche 911, which is already notoriously unstable, the high curbing and bumps makes the two combination a bit of a nightmare, especially in an endurance scenario. Not to say it isn't doable though, and I actually think the Porsche is one of the fastest cars around the ring if you can set it up correctly. However, that job isn't really meant for me. I've had most of the time on this track with the Audi R8 Evo in offline mode, and I can say it has been a pretty good time. I've had my fair share of frustrating moments, but it is a rewarding experience getting the track right. I would say that compared to other sims, it is more rewarding hitting the right line around here, as getting it wrong, especially in ACC, can make everything feel a little bit clunky and awkward. I can also say that the offline experience is pretty reasonable. The AI in ACC is pretty well known for following the racing line to a T, not really deviating much. But as the Nordschleife itself is a very single file track where overtaking just isn't easy, the AI doesn't really feel that off. Online, however, is something I'm going to need more time on, as whatever online experience I've had so far with this track has been pretty hairy to say the least. Most of the grid pretty much wipes out at least once during the first lap around, so we're going to have to see how that kind of comes around as people learn the track more. However, if you are curious about the grid sizes, offline the game can support a total of 50 cars, all of those being AI, while it can take a whopping 110 online. However, I've seen that servers do have a little bit of a hard time keeping up with a grid that large around a track that massive. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time until either developers sort it out or servers are able to handle the load that the Nordschleife brings. But overall, if you're familiar with the way that ACC drives, then you aren't really in for much of a surprise here. Just beware of the bumps. Is this track worth spending $13 on? In my opinion, it is. But what I will say is that the value this DLC has to you completely depends on what kind of racer you are. If you are the competitive esports kind who doesn't really care about the immersive quality of a game, but rather the racing experience, then I'm sure this DLC would really just be another track to add to the collection. But if you're someone like me who spends a lot of time mastering a track while being fully immersed in a second-to-none visual experience, then I would say that this is a must-buy. For $13 US, you get a track that is made up of excruciatingly high attention to detail, while being held on a platform that is probably second to none for GT racing. And with that, you have reached the end of the video. If you have any questions or just something to say, drop it down in the comment section below. Give it a like if you liked the video, and consider subscribing if you enjoyed some of the content here. And other than that, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys sometime later.